Should be ringing in.
Hey, Daniel.
Dr. Hall.
How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing okay. I'm just kind of hoping that as we talk about satellite terrorism, that the show doesn't get zapped from some geosynchronous orbit satellite there that's trying to stop this information from getting out.
Well, believe it or not, that actually does happen quite a bit.
And I would assume you're saying that based on the fact that you have had either testimony or eyewitness accounts of some sort of directed energy weapon or something to that effect when you're doing a program.
Yeah, actually, I've quite a number of programs I've done with other show hosts have been shut down midways or had a lot of technical difficulty, and I actually hosted a show of my own on an AM channel here in San Antonio, and they actually shut down the whole station for 2 days, burned out some stuff with what appeared to be an electromagnetic pulse, which also was the last day I was allowed to do my show there. So,
Well, there's a couple of people who said there was some audio issues, so I don't know. But you know what? I have found when sometimes when we're interviewing a guest and they get to the really deep information that is would not put the government or any other force or military industrial complex in a good light, it just something happens right at that point.
Well, actually, about 3 months ago now, I was doing a show with a relatively well-known syndicated talk show host that actually got 2 calls from a number coming up as the CIA asking him to not talk about this topic on the show. And he did continue to do the show, but with a bunch of technical difficulty, having to call me back repeatedly to keep me on the line. Turned out we got the show done, but I don't know how it sounded to listeners. I think it was probably pretty broken.
Mm-hmm. Well, there is one, and those long-time listeners and viewers of the Edge television broadcast will tell you that there was one guest we had on there that the Skype line went dead, and when he called into our 800 number, he got the NSA.
Yeah, I've seen that happen again. They'll spoof your phone. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at first I thought it was a joke, and he said, no, I'm dead serious. They told me, they were talking to him and everything. It's like, are you kidding me? So, I mean, you don't really want to, it's just hard to believe that kind of stuff happens. And we're going to be talking about directed energy, and I don't know what the opinion, the general consensus is out there, whether that's believable in other people's minds. But by now, they should understand what kind of technology is out there. Just look at the cell phone and what it does. It's basically a Star Trek communicator for all that goes. Even better, probably does even more than that communicator used to do. But the technology is just off the hook these days. And of course, now we're all, we have one organization tracking the entire world's communication. You can't, it seems to me, satellite terrorism or anything from a satellite would just be child's play for those people.
Well, and I don't know what your age is, but I'm 48 years old, and, just within my lifetime, I've seen technology just grow in bounds. I mean, I grew up in a rural area. We had a rotary dial phone that was on a party line. Cell phones didn't exist, to basically having a handheld computer in my hand that's, slightly bigger than a stick of gum is quite a jump.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there are those also though going. Let's go. I mean, I'm going to go right off the deep end. You don't have to, but I frequently go off the deep end, doctor. So don't worry about that. It's just part of the show. But I'll say that some of the cell phone or the advanced technology we have is reversed alien technology. But I think there's just enough evil humans out there to come up with some of the crap that's going on these days too.
Oh yeah, and a lot of the victims that I work with. Well, not a lot of them, but some of them, claim that they feel like what they're being victimized with is reverse alien technology. But if you look historically, they've worked on mind control techniques since the 50s. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, and I would think they were, and I've always said that, just refer to the 10 or 15-year-old movie Enemy of the State when they said in that movie they said what technology you see in the commercial sense, the government is 25 years ahead. So whatever we see now. What we found out is, they're still 25 years ahead.
And it's pretty amazing technology, and it could be used for a lot of good, but unfortunately right now it's not.
Well, they can do that because they have unlimited funding, and if they run out, they just print more.
That's it.
So, well, Dr. Hall, let's get into a little bit of your bio here before we get into the deep issues here we're going to be talking about tonight. How did you get involved with satellite terrorism and the use of satellite-based weapons?
Basically, I knew a girl here in San Antonio that came to me, confided in me that she was hearing voices, being stalked and being attacked with what she felt were invisible weapons. And I knew some people within the CIA and had had some discussions about the technology with them before. And while most of the other doctors she had spoken to were kind of blowing her off as mentally ill, since I did know about that technology, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. And we did some counterintelligence and some basic detective work around her place to see if what she was claiming was going on, and it certainly was. Counterintelligence on the perpetrator group that was victimizing her here in San Antonio. And once we had their identities identified, then they came after me with break-ins and car tampering and a couple of attempted murders. At the time with this kind of technology, there's no way to prove it. There's nothing much tangible you can use for proof. At that time, the Texas stalking laws weren't what they are now. Police said, we believe you, but, we can only deal with what we can prove. It's not what you know, it's what you can prove. Mm-hmm. She was drugged and raped repeatedly by these people, but had no good recall of the sexual assaults. So I decided the best thing to do would be to change the names and write the whole story in a book, just to expose the technology and that it is in the wrong hands or being allowed to be used in the wrong hands. Mm-hmm. So other people could read the book and see about the technology, and if it was happening to them, maybe get a better understanding of it as it was explained to me by CIA contacts. And the book did exactly that. I had a lot of people contact me saying, my son or my daughter or my wife had this happening, and we're glad we heard you on a radio show because now we understand what it is.
Wow. Now, from a clinical standpoint, when people say they hear voices in their head, they're going to automatically assume they have, multiple or split personalities going on there. Then there are those that say that the voices you hear are demonic in nature. But you're suggesting if there's a percentage, let's just say, of multiple personality disorder and space-based weaponry that is using directed energy to implant thoughts or to harass people, what would you say the percentage is?
In the grand population, or the whole population, it's probably pretty low. We estimate there's about 300,000 victims, legitimate victims, voicing these complaints, and it's intended to mimic schizophrenia or delusional disorder. It was invented that way. If you look back historically at MK Ultra and MK Search and all the other mind control experimentation that we know for a fact, happened because we have freedom of information based on those programs. They've always kind of targeted the general public, or what I refer to as kind of the edge of society. And a lot of times it is people with a drug history or, single women living alone, guys, and especially during MK Ultra, it was men using prostitutes, GIs, people that kind of lack the political clout or the financial ability to fight back. Mm. And it's been going on a long time. And if you look at the progression of the technology, how the research was done, most of it was headed up by psychiatrists. Ewan Cameron was the president of the American and the Canadian Psychiatric Association. He was a MK Ultra contractor. He was responsible for a lot of the research. At the very top of the psychiatric organizations, they're well aware this technology exists. Unfortunately, at the community level, they've been trained, by looking at the DSM-4, that if you're hearing voices, you're crazy, and there's nothing more to it. And that's where it's going to be up to us to get some education done and maybe talk to some of the community psychiatrists and start showing them that these people aren't having similar complaints. They're having exact duplicate complaints. Mm. And as a matter of fact, there's a group of men in Palm Springs, California. 60 of them are hearing voices and being attacked by directed energy. Mm. They're all hearing the same voice, and it's the voice of a girl that goes by the name Lisa.
Really?
And
What do I
that
pick that at?
defies coincidence.
All right. Well, Doctor, this is there are people that are sending in questions, and there's two ways that we receive questions from our viewers and or listeners, because we have where we stream the show live video. We also simulcast it in low bandwidth audio. So we get questions from Fast Blast and then from the live chat. So here's one from the live chat. It says, what is the worst case you ever heard about that deals with satellite terrorism? What's the worst case?
Well, that's hard to say. There's a lot of really horrible cases. The case I wrote about, this girl was hearing voices, being attacked with directed energy, being drugged with Rohypnol, a date rape drug, being sexually assaulted to the point where it would actually be called sexual trafficking. They were putting Rohypnol in bottled water and food in her house. They were subliminally controlling her where to drink or where to eat so they would get her drugged. They rented condos on either side of her to keep track of her and to monitor how drugged she would get with the Rohypnol. And once she was to a point where they felt that she was sufficiently drugged where she wouldn't have memory, they were breaking in and sexually assaulting her. And it went as far as men were paying money to come and sexually assault her.
Jeez, that is disgusting. So is this sort of like having that advanced technology rather than, say, controlling the population, or in addition to controlling the population to perform different functions or move them to different beliefs or to lower their resistance to what change is going on around them? It sort of reminds me of the TSA agents. They have this authority and they have this power, but yet they keep getting caught with their cell phones, taking pictures underneath girls' dresses, trading the X-rays of different women. So is this sort of like the base element, that these guys aren't some sophisticated group? They're just a bunch of freaks, peep show people, and various rapists that are using the technology in conjunction with trying to control the population.
Well, you're pretty close. What it is it's government technology that's been intentionally put into the hands of certain groups in just about every major city, from what I can tell around the globe, because I've certainly had just as many emails and complaints from people abroad as I have had here. That there's no way to get access to the technology without the government allowing you access to it. Mm-hmm. I know in my book, I kind of presented it in the book as possible criminals hacking into it. But for the record, I'll state that I begrudgingly agreed to present things in the book that way to keep one of my CIA contacts happy, which I was getting information from. I've got a second book coming out that certainly does not present it that way, and that's based on the technology alone. But it's basically subcontractors, most of whom are ran by former FBI or former CIA people, mm-hmm. working in theory as private investigators. And the way that it works is they're allowed access to the technology. They can use the technology carte blanche for whatever reason they see fit, as long as the data gets sent back to the appropriate agencies to be sifted through for one day determining on how effectively to use it to control a global population. Mm. So it's a little bit of both. It is experimentation, but on the ground level, the people being allowed to access it can use it however they want. And the group here uses it mostly for sexual assault and corporate espionage. There's a group in California that's using it more as a hate crime. But when you look at the tactics that they're using and the methodologies, they're the same just about in every case. Mm-hmm. So it's being done with a manual.
Mm-hmm. All right, and here's a question for you from the live chat again. Is there any defense against this directed energy weapon?
Well, we've been working on shielding techniques. I work with a group called ISA-ACT, or the International Center Against Abuse of Covert Technologies, and it's basically a think tank, a group of physicians, physicists, other professionals that bring something to the table as far as research. A Faraday cage, a well-made Faraday cage that blocks frequency ranges well into the ELF range, does offer most victims some relief. However, it's kind of hard to go about your daily living activities in a Faraday cage. We're working on actually building one where people can at least maybe get into one in their home to get some relief. most of this technology seems to link to the brain. A lot of people think they're chipped. We have found chips in some people. Most people, we haven't found chips, which explains why these people are usually stalked 24/7 for a long period of time. Not only is that a psychological component to the victimization, but it's GPSing these targeted individuals by locale. So a read can be gotten on their brain waves, essentially brain fingerprinting. And the rest of the tracking actually is done by remote neural monitoring is actually what it's called. But remotely scanning the brain waves. Everybody has a different brain fingerprint. And once you have that, then you can actually use this weaponry to manipulate the brain and the central nervous system.
I don't want to get too political in this particular show, but is there anything in Obamacare that has to do with this sort of mapping? Have you heard of anything, or any test or anything that a prospective government healthcare customer, I guess you would say, has to take a test to get either DNA or a brain scan or anything like that? Maybe are they building a database through Obamacare?
Well, there are some tenets in Obamacare that relate to that. And, as you know, the Obama administration has spent almost $1 billion on brain mapping. The people at the top there, certainly some of them that got that started know this is already going on, and they want to finish mapping out the areas of the brain that can be controlled. There's also a tenet within Obamacare that allows for microchipping, which, of course, they'll say that's for just placing your medical data on your wrist to expedite you getting in and out of clinics, because as Obamacare progresses, and I'm telling you this from a physician's point of view, it will come down to where there'll be 40 or 50 people in a physician's office every day waiting for time, and what they'll try to pass that off is as a data chip only that you can scan and instantly have the medical records on somebody. So far, I haven't seen where they're going to absolutely require it to be on Obamacare. But this administration, a lot of people had a lot of high hopes for, especially victims, when he talked about transparency in government and the whole nine yards. And people were so upset with Bush and Cheney for starting the Patriot Act that Obama seemed like a logical alternative, especially with the rhetoric he was espousing. But this administration has been one of the most secretive and one of the most apt to lie to the public of any administration we've ever had. And matter of fact, in my second book, I even make the comment that if the Bush-Cheney organization actually put the ball on the tee with the Patriot Act, Obama kicked it through the uprights. He actually signed off on bills that maintained NSA surveillance without oversight. He extended the Patriot Act. There's been more whistleblowers targeted, imprisoned, and prosecuted under Obama than there was Bush. This has been a horrible administration as far as this type of technology and any remedy to it.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. The birth of this technology and its advancement. And I don't know what is that term? You might help me with this. Where technology doubles. Is there a term for that?
There probably is. I can't think of it right now.
Yeah, and of course, I'm just wondering, comparatively, when I first heard that term and that terminology years back, they were saying that technology would double every year or 2 years. I think there was a word for that. But, it's unfortunate the confluence of that advanced technology now is coming under this president. Somebody put expansionality. That's not really the word, I don't think. But so he has that. And I also heard somebody say that if Lenin had, or Hitler had this technology, they could have finished the job, but they didn't. And they would be really proud of the way that technology is being used to track everybody and to watch everybody. As I said in the opening monologue, how the NSA now is literally tracking the world. That technology is now under the control of a dictator who does not have the best interests of the United States in mind. All right, here's a couple more questions for you, Dr. Hall. Have you ever used quartz crystals to interfere with a satellite weaponry?
Actually, yes, I have. We did some experimentation with that, and quartz crystals on their own won't distort ELF waves, but we did have some limited success with actually passing a heavy electromagnetic field through quartz crystals, which kind of caused them to excite. and give off an abundance of electromagnetic radiation, and that did seem to distort some of their technology temporarily. It wasn't enough to really help anyone, so we kind of backed away from it and kind of led our research down different areas. But one thing I can tell you we did do is took several fairly large pieces of quartz and put extremely strong magnets opposed to each other at each ends with the quartz suspended in a metal tube. And that way we had a strong electromagnetic field passing through the quartz. And that did seem to interfere a little bit with their technology, but not enough to give people any relief from the attacks.
Okay. And then here's another one. It says, this is from Tom Jones in the UK. Then are you saying that satellites can scan a person's brain from orbit?
That they pretty much can, and of course there's some groundworks that actually can be used along with that, and I know that seems far-fetched to a lot of people, but if you look at the technology they're using with the Mars rover, the antennas on the Mars rover actually send an RF signal out at about 0.5 to 1 watt off of that planet that's received by a satellite, transferred to another satellite in the Earth's orbit, and back down to Earth. So the technology for receiving very infinitesimal RF signals was developed long ago, and it's being currently used, not only in that technology, but in the technology we're dealing with as well.
All right, Doctor, by the way, one of our astute listeners wrote in on the Fast Blast. Dean from Montana says that was Moore's Law.
Yeah.
Moore's Law. So that's the very astute listeners we have on this program. All right, here Phil from North Carolina has this question for you, Doctor. What can we do to protect ourselves from outside these madmen and their lunacy? Now, I think we briefly brushed over that, but are you in any way creating a groundswell of resistance to the satellite-based weaponry that's being used on the population?
Yeah, actually, we've been having a lot of things we're doing as educational activities. There's a number of human rights organizations that are dealing with these complaints, and they have exponentially grown in the last several years. There's Freedom from Covert Surveillance and Harassment. There's ISAAct.org. I work with actually both organizations. Cheryl Welch's MindJustice.org, Eleanor White's Raven One, which deals with the organized stalking component of it. Those are educational activities, and the important thing with that is most of these people end up being looked at as delusional or schizophrenic by their family members, who end up dragging them to a psychiatrist who does usually give them a diagnosis. There's not any amount of information you're going to get on the internet that's going to convince a psychiatrist otherwise. And unfortunately, once you have that diagnosis, the police also don't take you seriously anymore, and then the break-ins and the harassment usually ramp up once they're fairly sure that the police aren't going to come to help you because you're listed as a crazy person in the police databanks. So education is important. Knowing for the victims, knowing who to talk to and who not to talk to. Don't try to convince people who don't believe you. That's why we have these human rights organizations where you can talk to people going through similar problems. As far as protection, we've been working extensively with changing the EEG, or the brain waves of the brain, to avoid the targeting, and have had a lot of success with that. I know most victims are looking for shielding, and the problem with shielding, you can, like I said, a Faraday cage will shield a lot of it, but you can't go through life in a Faraday cage. And certainly if you were to create a suit that operated as a Faraday cage, that would just further your chances of getting a psychiatric diagnosis when people see you living your life in it.
All right, here's another great question from Curious in the live chat. Who and how many groups are behind it all, and what government officials know about it, Doctor?
Well, I think just about all the Congress people know about it, because of all the victims I've ever dealt with, just about all of them have sent letters to the FBI. Most of them have sent letters to their Congress people. The problem is, as you know, the CIA and NSA research budgets and all the rest of their budgets are black. So the Congress people are just signing off on money being allotted and not actually looking into what the money's being done with. And the groups behind it are just about all of the government groups. The DoD has worked on this technology. The CIA and the NSA both have certainly worked on this technology. The early research was done mostly by the CIA, but done under front companies. Very little of the early MK Ultra mind control research was done directly under the CIA. They had front companies like the Human Ecology Fund, or was guised as legitimate university research. And we know that because we did get the financial records through Freedom of Information after the CIA was kind of caught red-handed doing MK Ultra, and it's still being done the same way. The reason this technology is put into usually retired CIA or FBI or NSA agents is so it is civilian groups doing the torture. That way the government has plausible deniability. If one of these groups is ever caught, then of course the appropriate agencies will probably claim that it was hacked technology.
Right. Plausible deniability. All right. From Betty in New Mexico, this question related back to the crystals earlier, and it was interesting that you did investigate that. She'd like to know, did you also investigate Oregon Energy?
No, we didn't do that. We kind of started focusing on shielding requirements and other ways to actually manipulate the signal or manipulate the brain to avoid targeting.
Okay. And then this question from James West out of live chat. Doctor, what is the real reason for chemtrails and how much approximate damage has occurred because of it?
Well, I will tell you this. I haven't done a lot of research into chemtrails, but I have. I'm actually quite good friends with Byron Beletzos, who has done a lot of research and a lot of writing into chemtrails. And our paths crossed several years ago at a little meeting I had at Sonoma State regarding this technology. And his theory on the chemtrails is that the chemtrails are actually being used to make the environment more electromagnetically friendly to some of these signals, both from HAARP and from satellite surveillance satellites, which would be the explanation for spraying aluminum salts and barium into the atmosphere. And that sounds like about as good a reason as any, for the spraying they're doing. Of course, a lot of the spraying they're doing under the guise of controlling global warming, right, by putting reflective salts in the atmosphere. But, it certainly looks like he may be onto something with just making the atmosphere more electromagnetically viable.
I see. Sort of working together with them. All right, here's another question for you. What about lead-lined hats? Will that defray the signal? And of course, there's always going to be jokesters out there. How about aluminum foil? Is that any deterrent?
Well, and that early on, when the book I wrote in 06, it released in 08. And in 08, most of these victims were referred to as the tinfoil hat crowd, and you still hear that occasionally. I think even after the Aaron Alexis shooting, some of the FBI people were referring to the conspiracy theorists who think that elf waves are bad as tinfoil hat people. And, that this technology is elf wave based and scalar wave based from what we can see. Lead lined hats and aluminum foil hats really don't do you any good. Okay.
And then here's the question. It says, now this is sort of off topic, but why not? We're going to throw it out there. Because we're really talking about the military-industrial complex and the deep black departments of the government are obviously involved. But were any of them sort of the stepchild of the Kennedy assassination? What do you think about it, since that's in the news this week?
Not that I can see. I mean, I don't see any involvement there. Of course, one could make an argument that Oswald certainly looked like a patsy in the Kennedy assassination. That maybe to some extent he was controlled. Certainly, Sirhan has come forward a number of times and stated that he was controlled into the shooting of Robert Kennedy. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's an element there, but it's nothing that I've really delved into with any certainty.
Mm-hmm. All right. And here's another question for you. Is this the reason they outlawed lead paint?
No, being a physician, I think that the lead paint being outlawed was certainly for medical reasons, because lead accumulates in the human body fairly easily. And is very difficult to get out without some pretty serious chelating drugs. So I think that probably was done mostly for safety, because even in a poorly made Faraday cage, which blocks out just about everything, these victims will usually still feel attack and hear voices. So, I mean, it even has to be a very, like I said, a Faraday cage made to block frequencies well into the low ELF range. So, lead really just wouldn't do it. And short of being in a lead box, maybe 300 feet underground.
Those of us that aren't drinking the fluoridated water have a real issue in believing that the United States, as a population as a whole, voted for someone who is obviously an imposter, and that's my own personal opinion, as president twice. There was nothing in the first 4 years that separated him or let him be able to demonstrate his leadership abilities or anything other than just nefarious activities that he performed. And so it was amazing that he got elected twice. Is there any possibility that the population or some segment of the population was told to vote for him through space-based weaponry suggestion?
That certainly looks like a very plausible explanation, doesn't it, Daniel? Because you're right. I mean, there was absolutely no reason to vote for him for a second term, except for the fact that the Republicans can't seem to come up with a viable candidate to run against him. The first election I can see. People, had a bad taste in their mouth after Bush and Cheney and the Patriot Act. He came up talking about transparency and, government by the people. And, a lot of people, bought that story and drank the Kool-Aid. But certainly after the first 4 years, there wasn't much reason to reelect him. And I've often wondered if that was some type of mass control. One of the things I tell people is, have you ever had one of those blah days where it's not a bad day and you've had plenty of sleep, but you're still not quite 100% and not quite just feeling yourself? Have you ever noticed that when you start talking to people you work with or your friends that everybody feels that way on that day? Yeah. I don't think that may be necessarily coincidence.
So is there any time that when you're investigating somebody who is saying that they are being electronically harassed or stalked or weapons of space being used for suggestion into their mind and their voices, has any of those, Doctor, you've determined are not weapons at all, or any kind of directed energy weapon or suggestive base that may in fact be, say, let's just go into the realm of the demonic, that they have maybe they have demons on the inside or something like that? Have you ever gone the other way, said, no, this isn't that, this is, you really have, you're possessed?
I personally haven't come across that where I would have thought it was possession. And by the way, I am a Christian, so I don't have a problem with thinking about infestation or possession. Certainly, if you're going to believe in one side, you got to believe in the other. And I've known a number of pastors who have dealt with demonic infestation and possession. Probably more the thing that we have to rule out is true mental illness. And sometimes it's hard to differentiate between somebody who may actually be mentally ill and who's a victim. But most of the true victims that I deal with led normal lives. Most of them are educated. Most of them are professionals. Most of them were successful. And they can narrow it down to the day that they notice themselves being stalked. Most of them have plate numbers of the people that were stalking them. Some of them have identities of the people that were stalking them by having those plate numbers ran. And most of them can pinpoint the day that they began getting attacked with directed energy weapons while someone ridiculed them with voices in the skull or voices around them that only they could hear. And when I say that, it's someone attacking you, burning your skin, and telling you they're doing it. Or telling you they're going to kill you by doing it. So it's very obvious, and it's not, typically the garbled voices in the subway or someone thinking that they're, hearing God or angels talking to them that you typically see in schizophrenics. And most of these victims that complain of this are already past the age of being diagnosed as schizophrenic. Schizophrenia starts at a very early age in both men and women, and usually are people that, if you do a history, were never right even from their youth. Like I said, most of these victims are professionals in their late 30s, early 40s who can, give you the date of when it started. So it can be distinguished from mental illness with appropriate history. Now, I have talked to a number of pastors who fully believe that this is going on. One who's unfortunately passed away now is Grant Jeffries, who wrote a book called Shadow Government. And he went into this weapons technology and voice-to-skull technology extensively. And of course, he took a spiritual warfare view of it, which, a pretty good argument can be made for that it is spiritual warfare. Certainly the people perpetrating these torture sessions on people, could be viewed as demonic. So, the two definitely intertwine.
Is that the same Grant Jeffries that wrote The Fingerprint of God?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, he wasn't that old, was he?
No, he was relatively young and died of a heart attack.
When I go down that road there, you said at the beginning of the broadcast, Dr. John Hall, that some of your interviews have been interfered with and some stations have been literally shut down. And, of course, there's that recent event of this reporter that his Mercedes blew up and his engine transmission went and blocked down the road. And, Mercedes still hasn't investigated how their car blows up. You think there would have been a recall, at least. But have you been stalked yourself? Have you, other than, I think you mentioned a couple things, but, do you fear for your life at any time?
Yes, I've been stalked, and yes, I've had attempts on my life. Do I fear for my life? Not necessarily. My view on it is that, the right road and the moral road is usually not the easy road. And I've chose to not take the easy road. So if it happens, it happens. I know Dr. Fred Bell was a good friend of mine. Was also very heavy into fighting this technology and its use on the public. I don't know if you ever heard of him, but he was a physicist and actually worked on some of these projects with the DoD.
Did you say Fred Bell?
Before coming out against it.
Did you say, Doctor? Did you say Fred Bell?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was on this show.
Well, he interviewed. At my request, Jesse Ventura and his organization did a conspiracy theory episode, 2 episodes for True TV, dealing with this technology. And the producers asked me to put them in touch with credible people to interview, which I did. One of them was Fred Bell. He did interview with Jesse Ventura and was found dead of a heart attack in his hotel room 48 hours after the show.
Wow. Interesting. And it does seem that different people die for different reasons. Usually it's people that are against the government or has evidence against the government. Isn't that interesting?
Well, and Fred Bell had told me when he agreed to do this interview that his handlers probably wouldn't like him doing it, and certainly he did the interview and then was dead 48 hours later. Another good friend of mine who actually is in this fight is Dr. Robert Duncan. He worked on some of these CIA projects as a scientist and engineer. Mm-hmm. He's been harassed to the point where he's fairly well underground and not necessarily doing much public speaking anymore.
Yeah, he's been on this program as well.
Yeah. Well, that was probably the last time. He's being pretty seriously harassed. I've had attempts on my life, had bullets shot through the windows of my house, had the bolts taken out of the hood latch of my truck so my hood flew up on me going down the highway. Have had friends harassed by FBI agents, especially about the second book that's going to be coming out in 2014, trying to stop that from coming out. So, those of us that are fighting against this certainly are kind of suffering the consequences for it.
Interesting. Somebody in the live chat pointed this out, and this is a great question. Is it possible that in the paranormal range, in particularly ghost hunters, and I've used EVP hardware myself and seen it work, is it possible that EVP, electronic voice phenomena, is nothing more than tapping into space-based directed weaponry with programming being shot down?
Yeah, I've kind of wondered that myself. I've heard a number of EVPs played on various radio shows. And we've actually, I haven't done it yet, but that's one of the things we were thinking about studying, was seeing if we can pick up some of these signals and at least pick up the audio. You know, the problem with this technology, and even when it was developed according to the Army's Directorate on Non-Lethal Weapons, was that even with a microphone in the ear or a microphone near the skull, that the audio cannot be recorded. So we've been using ELF wave receivers and various types of RF receivers to try to convert the electronic signal, you know, back into an audio sound, so we can actually record some of the comments that are being made to these people. Believe it or not, every now and again you can actually pick it up with digital voice-activated recorders. And we have kind of thought about experimenting with some of the EVP boxes to see if that will pick up the sound. And I've wondered that myself, if they're actually picking up on some of the subliminal messaging.
And very interesting. You know, this does seem to be a very big piece of the puzzle of different phenomena that's going out there. Here's another great question coming in from the United Kingdom. Is scalar technology involved in mind control?
We believe it is. As you know, scalar technology cannot be shielded. I was in contact a number of times with Konstantin Miel in Germany, who is one of the big names in scalar research. You know, some of the government agencies still actually deny that scalar waves exist and that it's strictly a research phenomenon. But I can tell you from personal experience, there was several times that I was in a home of one particular victim that, you know, to actually, I guess, put it simply, she had a electronically remote-controlled mouse that's actually a pet's toy. And it holds batteries, and you can remotely control it to play with your cats or dogs. They were turning it off and on, which is not uncommon in battery-operated appliances or even, you know, alternating current appliances, that they can actually use reverse electromagnetic pulse to turn things off and on. It was happening so frequently that she took the batteries out of this thing, so the noise and the blinking lights on it, you know, wouldn't, you know, scare her at night. When I was there, it actually lit up, started making noise, and flew off of a shelf onto the floor with no batteries in it. You know, now the paranormal people would say that's a poltergeist, but scalar waves, which I don't know if you knew this or your listening audience knows, scalar waves deposit energy on impact. Not only do they deposit energy on impact, they also deposit ionizing radiation on impact. You can actually have UV bulbs sitting in a room with a scalar generator with no wires and nothing hooked to them, and light those bulbs up strictly by the energy being transmitted by the scalar generator. So scalar waves certainly would explain some of the people who complain of, you know, things moving, flying off shelves, or powering up despite having no batteries.
Dr. John Hall, we're about at the top of the hour. We normally take a 5-minute break here, so just stay on the Newsmaker line. Before we do, let me get your website here in our background. I've showed your book several times and your website. But if somebody goes to your website, what can they find there?
You can contact me. You can order the book. Another website that we have up right now is www.newbreedmovie.com. There has been a screenplay made on the book. And we're working on actually getting a drama based on a true story, strictly for educational awareness on the big screen.
Okay. All right, just stay on the line there, Doctor, and we'll be back in about 5 minutes with you. Okay?
It's okay. That sounds good, Daniel.
Okay. All right, everybody, you're watching and or listening to the Edge television broadcast. On our Newsmaker line tonight is, of course, Dr. John Hall talking about space-based weaponry. If you missed any of the first hour, you can see the entire broadcast in its high-def video glory immediately after the broadcast is over. And then you can, we also upload the video onto the live stream or to the YouTube channel, and you can also download our podcast as well, and the audio extract will be placed in the guest bio section as well. If we haven't had a guest on the program you'd like to see, we want you to go to the edgeam.com website and click on the drop-down link that says suggest a guest. Remember, 99% of all guests have been suggested by you, our esteemed viewing and listening audience. Also on the left side of the website, you can take the Classic Edge poll. That poll does rotate, so you can refresh your browser, and a different question will come up. And so there you go for that. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. I'm just going to play various videos here for just a second, give everybody a break, and we're going to be right back.